Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. These words from Jesus have echoed across centuries, but what if we've misunderstood their meaning entirely? What if the narrow gate isn't about religious exclusivity, but about spiritual initiation? Not a physical path, but a metaphysical one, hidden in plain sight, encoded for the few who have eyes to see. You see, in ancient mystical traditions, gates were never just doors. They were thresholds between worlds, between dimensions of consciousness. To walk through a narrow gate is to undergo compression, purification, and death of the ego. It is not just a moral path, but an alchemical one, and yet most never even approach it, because the wide road is comforting, familiar. It sedates the soul with distractions, dogma, and worldly comfort. But the narrow gate, it strips you bare. In this video, we'll explore what Jesus truly meant by this cryptic metaphor. We'll journey through forgotten gospels, ancient mystery schools, and esoteric teachings to uncover the real meaning of the narrow gate. By the end, you'll understand why this teaching has remained hidden from the masses, and how walking this path could transform your entire reality. Because the narrow gate is not just something you find, it's something you become. The concept of the narrow gate didn't originate solely within Christianity. It is, in fact, a recurring motif found across the ancient world, embedded within the teachings of the mystery schools of Egypt, the initiatory rites of Eleusis in Greece, the Sufi path of Fana, and even the Vedic journey toward moksha. In each of these traditions, the idea of passing through a narrow way represents a sacred threshold, a rite of passage meant for the few, not the many. It symbolizes the difficult and inward path towards self-realization and union with the divine. Early Gnostic Christians, those who followed teachings like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary, understood Jesus' words not as mere moral advice, but as metaphysical instruction. To them, the narrow gate represented the path of inner gnosis, the stripping away of illusion, ego, and attachment in pursuit of divine truth. But as institutional religion began to rise, especially in the 4th century under Constantine, the mystical aspects of Jesus' teachings were gradually buried. The path was no longer one of inner transformation, but one of external obedience. The gate was narrowed by dogma, not discipline. Why? Because mysticism empowers the individual. It cannot be controlled. It does not rely on intermediaries, temples, or titles. Thus, the esoteric dimension of Jesus' words was hidden, veiled beneath layers of doctrine and orthodoxy. What was once a radical call to awaken the soul became a line repeated in fear-based sermons. But in the original context, the narrow gate was never about exclusivity. It was about intensity. Few find it, not because it is forbidden, but because it demands everything. It requires that the seeker forsake the false self to discover the eternal one. The path is open, but few are ready to walk it. The narrow gate, as presented by Jesus, is not a physical passage, nor is it a metaphor for external barriers. It is, instead, a call to spiritual refinement, a journey inward to the very heart of one's being. But what does this truly mean? First, we must understand that the narrow aspect of the gate symbolizes the difficulty of self-transformation. The gate is not wide, easily walked through by the masses, because the true path requires a shedding of the ego, the desires of the flesh, and the distractions of the material world. It's a tight passage, like the narrowness between one's false self and one's true nature. This inward journey cannot be undertaken lightly, for it demands focus, discipline, and the courage to face one's deepest fears and limitations. Think of it like a spiritual alchemist refining raw, impure metal into gold. Just as gold is extracted from the earth through intense pressure and heat, so too does the seeker of truth pass through a similar trial, burning away the impurities of the soul. The path through the narrow gate is filled with challenges that break down the illusions of worldly attachment, forcing the seeker to confront the darkness within before the light can shine through. Jesus was not simply talking about moral perfection, but spiritual liberation. The narrow gate, then, becomes a symbol of spiritual awakening. It represents the divine spark within each of us, obscured by layers of accumulated fear, desire, and ignorance. To walk through this gate is to journey beyond the mind, beyond societal expectations, beyond the identities we construct for ourselves, into a realm of pure being. And here's the paradox. While the gate is narrow and the path is difficult, it leads to freedom. It is only through shedding the false self, the self that is bound by fear and ego, that one can experience the boundless freedom of the soul. The true self lies not in the external world, but within. The narrow gate is the invitation to access this deeper, truer existence. But how can we navigate this narrow passage? What does it look like in practice? Now we enter the heart of the mystery surrounding the narrow gate, an exploration of its deeper meanings and the paradoxes it presents. At its core, the narrow gate challenges our fundamental understanding of freedom. In the material world, freedom is often equated with choice, abundance, and ease. We are taught that the wider the path, the more options we have, the freer we are. But the teachings of Jesus flip this notion on its head. True freedom, he suggests, comes not through the pursuit of external pleasures or desires, but through limitation. The narrow gate is not a barrier to freedom. It is the gateway to a higher spiritual form of freedom. Freedom from the ego, from the endless chase of transient pleasures, and from the chains of the material world. This paradox is not new. In the mystical traditions of many ancient cultures, we find similar teachings. In Buddhism, for example, the concept of the middle way teaches that liberation comes not from indulgence or asceticism, but through balance and moderation. Likewise, in Taoism, the Tao Te Ching speaks of the virtue in simplicity, emphasizing that true power lies in yielding and being in harmony with the natural flow of life. The narrow gate, in this context, mirrors these ancient wisdoms. True spiritual awakening comes not from external abundance, but from the internal stripping away of falsehoods, attachments, and illusions. The esoteric meaning of the narrow gate also connects to the idea of initiation. In ancient mystery schools, initiation was a rite of passage that required the initiate to face trials, endure suffering, and let go of the ego in order to enter a higher state of consciousness. The narrow gate symbolizes such an initiation. It is the point of no return, the place where the seeker either surrenders the lower aspects of their being to rise to a higher plane of existence or turns back to the world of distractions and desires. The journey through the narrow gate is also deeply personal. It is not a path that can be walked in the same way by all. Each soul must go through its own transformation, shedding its own particular burdens. The narrow gate is a spiritual crucible, forging the soul through trial and self-reflection and allowing for the emergence of a new, awakened consciousness. Understanding the profound teachings of the narrow gate offers us a path to spiritual transformation. But what does this look like in everyday life? How can we begin to walk this narrow path toward deeper wisdom and liberation? 1. Embrace simplicity. The first step is to simplify. The world often teaches us that happiness lies in accumulation, whether it's wealth, possessions, or experiences. But the narrow gate demands the opposite, a shedding of excess. Start by decluttering not only your physical space, but your mental and emotional life. Let go of unnecessary attachments, distractions, and material pursuits. Create space for deeper spiritual practices like meditation, contemplation, and self-inquiry. Through this, you begin to create a life that is centered not on external accumulation, but on internal growth. 2. Practice self-discipline. The path through the narrow gate requires discipline. This is not the kind of discipline enforced by the ego, but one that comes from within, a commitment to your spiritual path. Consider incorporating daily rituals or practices that cultivate awareness and presence, such as mindfulness, prayer, or fasting from distractions like social media. These small daily acts of self-discipline gradually strip away the noise of the world, allowing you to attune to your higher self. 3. Confront your shadow. The narrow gate isn't just about ascension, it's about facing the parts of yourself that are difficult to confront. The ego resists change, and the more we walk the path of transformation, the more the ego fights back. But true liberation comes from embracing the shadow, the aspects of ourselves we hide or deny. Take time to journal, meditate, or engage in therapy to uncover the limiting beliefs, traumas, or attachments that bind you to the material world. By facing these, you can transcend them, allowing you to pass through the narrow gate. 4. Cultivate gratitude and surrender. Ultimately, the narrow gate is not a journey of struggle, but of surrender. It is about aligning with the divine flow of life, accepting that not all things are meant to be controlled or understood. Practice gratitude for what is, rather than striving for more. Let go of the need to have everything figured out and trust the process. As we journey through the esoteric teachings of the narrow gate, we uncover a path that leads not to worldly success or material gain, but to a deeper, more profound connection with the divine. This path requires us to simplify our lives, practice self-discipline, confront our shadows, and ultimately surrender to a greater truth. It is a road less traveled, not because it is difficult to find, but because it demands an honesty and a willingness to let go of the illusions that bind us. The narrow gate is not a punishment or an obstacle, but a divine invitation to awaken, to shed the weight of the world, and to emerge into a higher state of consciousness. It offers us liberation, not in the sense of escaping the world, but in transcending the ego's hold over us and awakening to the timeless wisdom that lies within. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, are you ready to walk through the narrow gate? What will you need to release to make that journey possible? The answers lie not in the outer world, but within your heart, waiting to be discovered. If you found this exploration meaningful, share it with others who may be ready to uncover these secrets. Subscribe, and together, let us continue to seek the wisdom that has been hidden for centuries, guiding us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the divine.